I think it's about time, so I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker, Mr. John Mayer. Mr. John Mayer is the Executive Director of the Center for Computer Assisted Legal Instruction, or CAFLL. CAFLL is a nonprofit consortium of almost 200 U.S. law schools. CAFLL publishes online tutorial, open access casebooks, and develop software for legal education and access to justice. Mr. Mayer has a degree in computer science from Northwestern University and a master's from Illinois Institute of Technology. Mr. Mayer has been active in legal education since 1987 and has been with CAFLL. I will do quickly in Chinese. John Mayer 先生是计算机辅助法律中心，也称 CAFLL 的执行主任。CAFLL 是一个由近200所美国法学院组成的非营利组织。CAFLL 出版在线教程，开放获取案例手册，并开发用于法律教育和辅助司法的软件。His subject today is very exciting. Law librarians help people. AI can help law librarians help more people. And on a side note, I would like to mention that Washington College of Law hosted a CAFLL conference a year ago, and me, CAFLL, and
add the librarians CAFLL lessons for all of your CAFLL.
That's right. We're the contributor to OCLC of the original bib records of CAFLL lessons, and I'm very excited. The floor is yours, Mr. Mayer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you for that. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Where do you start with something like this? Well, you start with the agenda. So, who I am and who am I and what is CAFLL? AI is overhyped. What is AI? It is very overhyped. I'm going to talk about patterns and decision trees, a little case study of AI applied to access to justice, my area of specialty, and then finally, why law librarians should be more involved in this. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Well, I hope some of this is a little surprising, or I hope it's a little exciting. So who am I and what is CAFLL? This is not the first time that I've talked to Chinese law professors about legal databases. Actually, it goes back 30 years. When I was the IT director at Chicago-Kent College of Law, we had a visitor, and it drives me crazy that I can't remember his name, and I couldn't find any pictures because, it wasn't cell phones at the time. The only picture, I resurrected this a few years ago, was me standing in front of the software that he had brought, which was all of Chinese law on 4 floppy disks. Of course, it wasn't all of Chinese law, but it was a new digital project that they were working on. They called it East Law, which we all thought was humorous, and he didn't understand the joke because he was not aware of West Law at the time, or it just seemed like a natural name for it. But this is a picture of me, I think, right after we got it installed. Of course, as you can see, I'm still as young and gorgeous and full of hair and as slim as I was 30 years ago. My gosh, I'm embarrassed to show that. I apologize. So I am the executive director of CAFLL, and I started in 1994. So this is my 25th year. I've been with CAFLL for 25 years. And what my resume or what my introduction didn't say is that I'm not a lawyer. And so how many people in the room are not lawyers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. Welcome, friends. Because people who have worked with lawyers or law professors or law librarians for a long time but are not lawyers, I believe we have a unique mindset. we're the non-lawyer, we're the co-presenter, we're the assistant, the partner, the helper. We're something else, but we don't have the legal expertise. But boy, I feel like I've picked up a lot of legal knowledge. So CAFLL is 11 people. We just hired a new person. And we do a lot of things. We publish over 1,000 web-based tutorials that cover 40 different legal subject areas. We publish casebooks. I pay law faculty to write casebooks, and then I give them away for free. Boy, is that fun. And we do that for lots of reasons that is a whole nother presentation. And I'm actually giving a presentation on that about a week from today, but it's going to be a webinar. The ALS Tech section is doing a summer webinar series, and so you should find that and check that out. We sponsor a conference, which we do here at American, but last month it was at University of South Carolina. We basically run around the country following brand new law school buildings and make people tour them, and because when you build new buildings, that's when all the exciting technology happens. Next year, we're coming home for the 30th at Chicago, Kent, because that's where the first conference was. And we sponsor the CAFLL Awards as well, which are awards given to the student who gets the highest grade in the class. And the only reason we did that is so that CAFLL became a verb. So students go around saying, "How'd you do in the class?" I said, "I CAFLL'd it," which means I got the highest grade. So we're a nonprofit. There's over 200 U.S. law schools, but there's also 40 non-U.S. law schools. It's very inexpensive for a non-U.S. law school to be a member, $250. You get access to everything that we do. It supports all our efforts. Let's move on. So AI is overhyped. Hyped is a slang term, something, and there's lots and lots of examples that I can pull from this. So first of all, there's TV shows with comedians telling us that the robot apocalypse is upon us, pictures of the Terminator. But even in the area of law, right, there's articles that say the robot lawyers are here and they're winning, scaring lawyers that their jobs will soon be taken away from them. It's worse than that. Will robot lawyers take our jobs? What do you think? How many people say yes, they will take our jobs? Good. None of you. That's right. But even the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, when he was speaking to the graduating class at his daughter's high school graduation, said, "Beware the robots." So you can't get any more legal hype than that when the Chief Justice is in on it. So finally, I need to explain that I thought this was the perfect shirt to wear. So I'll take my jacket off now. That I thought this was the perfect shirt to wear. So I'll take my jacket off now. And I know, I wasn't sure how big the room would be, but you might not be able to see it, so it's up on the screen. And as you can see, it's the evolution of man from chimpanzee to ape to Neanderthal, finally to the point where you're a Homo sapien, and then our robot overlords kill us. So, even in popular culture, AI and robots are overhyped as this big, confusing, implacable force that we can't do anything about. And nothing could be further from the truth, I hope. So AI is overhyped. I don't think we're going to have self-driving cars in 5 years. Somebody said 2100. On the graph, I couldn't see how far it went up. It was Jamie. And I'm like, yep, it's not going to happen for a while. Robots are not going to replace lawyers or judges. At least I hope not, because I'm going to show you some things that will scare you. But I'm not a total AI skeptic, right? There will be a lot more automated decision making. And in fact, I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb or simple definition for AI, automated decision making. So decision making made outside of the direct control of a human being, right? So, you start a talk like this, the first thing you do is, what's the definition of artificial intelligence? And up pops this definition, but I want to leave it there because the ad that was delivered to me when I looked it up was what? Alita, Battle Angel. And what is she? She's a robot who fights for the rights of poor people, and and has sentience. And it's a corny movie, but I loved it. I love anime. I just thought while I'm looking up the definition of artificial intelligence, I got that ad. So this is not a really helpful definition, right? It's kind of hand-wavy. A branch in computer science dealing with the simulation of intelligent behavior in computers and the capacity of a machine to imitate intelligent human behavior. I like those two words. Simulate intelligence, imitate intelligence. It's not actually intelligence, not as we think of intelligence. It's not contextual, it's algorithmic, or it's calculated, and it's based on inputs. Won't go any further than that. So the way that we find or see or manifest AI in our lives is often not called AI when it's not being overhyped. And you hear things like this, right? Augmented intelligence, cognitive analytics, expert systems. I like that word. Knowledge-based systems, intelligent agents, guided interviews, curated experiences. Ed Walters said was navigators, legal navigators. Well, I like to pop out some of those terms like augmented because it implies that it's an add-on to an already smart or an already existing process. And I think that's where AI's value will be found, is that it's not a replacement, but a partner in solving difficult problems. So let's go into this a little bit. So what is AI? I'm going to start with the patterns talk. So two big definitions of AI are rules turned into code, and I'm going to come into that in a second, and this whole area of machine learning called patterns. And that's divided further by whether the patterns are turned into something intelligent by a human or by a machine learning itself or by some sort of trial and error algorithm. And here's the example I want to give you that's both interesting. And here's the example I want to give you that's both interesting and scary. Basically, the definition of pattern AI would be look at data, so hopefully big data, but it doesn't have to be big. Find a pattern, apply that pattern to new data, and then make a decision on that. Right? Otherwise, it's just an academic exercise. So let's watch an example. Let's look at an example of that. So let's say I go and look up cats, orange cats. And I get a bunch of pictures of cute orange cats. I know. You always got to throw cats in your presentations these days so that people go, "Aw," right? So you look at enough pictures of orange cats, and you're also going to get a picture of an orange cat that's like curled up into a ball. And then you come across something like this, right? Orange cat or croissant? Which one is it? And the way this is set up is it's cat, croissant, cat, croissant, cat, croissant, cat, croissant. Actually, it's a muffin. Cat. Actually, it's a muffin. Cat.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
All croissant.
I'm right. They're all croissants. Right. But you know, and this is a famous, or this is a popular way to say that machine learning, vision learning for artificial intelligence is going to run into trouble because you might think of a cat as a cat. It's a breathing mammal with fur. But if you're handing pictures to a computer, it's going to say, I'm looking for these colors. I might be looking for eyeballs or for paws. I might be looking for certain types of patterns in visual recognition. And oh, by the way, other things look a lot like that too. And so without some further deeper learning or guidance, the machine's going to be wrong. The second example, Ed already used it, the Shar-Pei or croissant. So I won't, and that's a pile of Shar-Peis on the far right there, because that's a pile of croissants next to it, right? And then that's all the Shar-Peis, by the way. It took me a moment to figure that out. The one that he mentioned that I really love, blueberry muffin or chihuahua. It's muffin, chihuahua, chihuahua, muffin, and so on. Humans are going to have trouble with this, right? How many of you have gotten stuck with "I am not a robot" by not finding all of the street signs, in the photo? But that's basically the idea. This is my favorite, by the way. This is corgi butts or loaves of bread. A corgi is if you've never seen, I should have put up a real picture of a corgi. A corgi is a really small dog. Actually, Chinese, I believe, originally. It was gifted to the Queen of England or the British royalty over 100 years ago, and her line of corgis, just recently the last one, passed away. But they were brought back from near extinction, about a century ago from China. Yeah. So let's take a real example, though, of this, or a somewhat real example. There was in 2016, a fellow was driving his Tesla, which has auto assist. It's not a driverless car, but he kind of treated it that way because I think they found he was watching a Harry Potter movie when this happened. And the question is, well, how did this happen? Well, let's look at this. So this is a look at the data, find a pattern, apply the pattern to new data, and make a decision. In this case, a bad decision. So here's the data. Decision. In this case, a bad decision. So here's the data, and I'm making up, but at the end I'll pull it together into the real. So here's the data. There's a whole bunch of pictures of street signs, above the highway, and you can see that if you find a pattern there, there's that empty space underneath it that allows a car to go through. So everything's going to be all right? So the computer has learned where to go. So you apply that pattern to new data, and this is an actual picture of the truck that he hit. The computer looked at that and said, all right, I'm going to go through there. And that's the decision that got made, not to stop. And I was like, holy cow. Now, Tesla never said, don't pay attention when you're on driver assist. They've since changed their driver education a little bit to say it's called driver assist. You have to pay attention, and keep your hands on the wheel and such as that. But the proof of this is that even Elon Musk, who's the CEO of Tesla, tweeted, well, the radar tunes out what looks like an overhead road sign to avoid false braking events. So you don't want the car to see that sign and say, ooh, that might be a truck, I better stop, and they're in the middle of a highway. So it's not that the computer didn't see the sign. It's that the computer was told, if you see signs, you can ignore them because you can drive through them. And somehow the pattern recognition software confused a sign with a wall of a side of a truck. All right? Now that's a really simple example, I know, but you have to, and you just have to use your imagination to realize that the computer thinks differently or learns differently about patterns than humans do. Don't find or don't think about. So the question is whether, that's obvious to us. As a human, we know the difference between a sign, but it's not obvious to a computer. It has to be taught and given our context, the human context for everything. So machine learning learns best when there's lots and lots of data. Somebody, Ed was talking about the fact that there's 12 million cases that it can learn from. And I'm like, that's not enough. And I base this, and I'm not a lawyer, so I hope I don't sound stupid in the next minute when I explain this. But to me, a case is literally and especially a Supreme Court case, is the very end tip of a long process where there was memos and depositions and testimony, and then there was thought processes in both counsel's table, and then there was the judge thinking in both counsel's table, and then there was the judge thinking about it, or multiple judges, because it's a Supreme Court case, and all you get is the very condensed down version of the opinion. And from that, you have to extract out a whole bunch of knowledge about the patterns of how these things are decided. So to me, that's not big data, that's tiny data. And if you had every conversation that all the lawyers had about the case included in that, I might be more inclined to think that there is some big data here to be mined for the pattern that will help predictive analytics tell you how cases are going to happen. All right, none of you lawyers jumped up and said, boy, are you stupid, so okay. So good data and big data is hard to find, right? It's even if we had OpenPacer, Pacer is the federal database of all, you don't get everything that's said in a case or available in a case. And there's no guarantee that there isn't errors in that data. And the errors can be anywhere, as we saw with Tesla, right? It could be in the pattern that it was taught, or it could be in the way the pattern was evaluated, or it could be in the decision that was made, or it could be in the data. You know, is it a corgi butt or is it a loaf of bread? You know, bad data there. So machine learning is hard, and that's why I'm skeptical about AI taking your jobs. I'm not a lawyer. So what about AI that I call decision trees? Now, back in the old days, rules turned into code used to be called AI. In other words, if you make this amount of money and you live in this county and you have 2 kids, then you are eligible for this program. All right, it's only 3 if-then you are eligible for this program. All right, it's only 3 if-then statements, but that was a decision tree or an expert system. In other words, somebody converted the rules or the regulations into algorithmic code that could make an automated decision. And because that's sort of explicable or understandable, people are hesitant to call that AI because it's too simple. And there's even a joke, or there's a theorem about that called Tesler's theorem that says if you can understand it, it's not AI. Which the reverse is if it's inexplicable, then it must be AI. So AI is magic, and magic is moving as we get better at explaining what the algorithms are actually doing. I'm not kidding. Look up Tesler's theorem, Tesler. So rules turned into code look like this: decision trees or flowcharts, where there's information in there, and then there's branching based on information. Married, not married, live inside Cook County, don't live inside, citizen, not citizen, make more than $50,000, make less than $50,000. And the collection of those branches forms a tree of decisions that are made. Some of those things, when they're coded, are coming straight out of the law. The statute or the regulation might say it. But an awful lot of law isn't written down so explicitly. It has to be interpreted, what I would call a heuristic. A heuristic is the way we've done things in a particular county or courthouse. And that has to come out of somebody who's lived the experience, which is to say, the brain of the lawyer. Right? So a good system, it's, to me, it would be relatively easy to turn all law into a decision tree. Much harder to turn law and the rules of the court and what works best, strategy or good advice or good guidance, into something that you could do in a decision tree. All right? So let's look at a little case study of this. AI applied to access. And AI, my modified definition of AI as rules as code. So first I have to explain the access to justice problem in the United States. So if you have 10 people and they're poor, they're all poor, and they're eligible for free help from the Legal Services Corporation. Legal Services Corporation is it's a nonprofit, but it's funded by the U.S. government to help people with their legal problems, their civil legal problems. The criminal stuff is handled by the public defenders, in every state. So right now, if there's 10 poor people lining up for help with their eviction, their child custody problem, their even get in the door, there aren't enough lawyers to even deal with half of them, fully 50%. It's worse than that, but I'm not going to go into that. I'll just say that it's at least half of them can't get in. So back in 2001, I worked on a project where we went around the country and we sat in courtrooms and we watched self-representing litigants. We watched poor people bumble and fumble their way through the horror of courts, where they filled out the wrong forms, were chastised by judges, were pushed around by plaintiffs because they were in the wrong place. They tried to ask questions that nobody wanted to answer for them because you're not allowed to give them legal guidance or advice, and they struggled to fill out complicated legalistic forms. And I spent 5 days in 3 different courtrooms in 3 different states watching this, and about 20 or 30 other students, both law students and design, and about 20 or 30 other students, both law students and design students, did the same thing. They all came back. They worked for months and they wrote a book called Meeting the Needs, and they came up with 200 ideas on how to make things better. Now only 200. So coming out of that project, Callie got some grant money along with Chicago Kent, and we built a tool to just help people with one thing, one space, and that was court forms. Turns out court forms are a huge obstacle for people. Filling out a form, we did a little study and we found that like up to 70% of the time they were either filling out the wrong form, filling it out incorrectly, or there was some problem, with them completing what is already an attempt by the courts to simplify the process, right? So we came up with a piece of software. It's at a2jauthor.org, and it looks like this. And it walks people through filling out any court form, right? There's nothing else on the screen except the person there talking to you. The size of this box here is intentional. Everything about the design is intentional. We found that when lawyers designed this thing, they wanted to put, I have to explain a lot of things. And so they would put reams and reams of text. And we gave them a little tiny box. And they said, I need this box to be bigger. And they said, no. If you want to explain more, make another page. That's how much text you can say to people. And we would prefer if you didn't, by the way. Do this in as few words as possible because people freak out when they have to read long, scrollable pieces of text. The progress bar are the little signs, as you get closer and closer to the courthouse, and that represents justice. And of course, there's a mobile version of it now. So here's some of the things we learned. Poor people struggle with legal language. All right, everybody say duh. Duh. Of course they struggle with legal language. All non-lawyers struggle with legal language. Poor people have less education. Of course, they're poor. They have a GED, which is to say they didn't finish high school or they finished high school later. They probably didn't go to college. And so generally they're going to struggle with the complexity of these things. Poor people with legal problems are anxious. They're stressed out. The system is coming down on them. And so when you're stressed, you make bad decisions or you don't think clearly. Some other less obvious things. Legal process is a legal education opportunity. People come into the system, fail, and go away, and then come back a little smarter, right? They learn with each interaction. And so there's an opportunity to actually teach them something, even more. Interaction. And so there's an opportunity to actually teach them something, even more. Don't waste users' time. If a form is going to take a half hour to fill out, and there are things that will exclude people, like they're under 18, they make too much money, they live in the wrong county. Ask those questions first. It might be at the bottom of the form, but put that question at the top of the automated form. Are you over 18? No. You can't do this. Get out of here. Oh, thank you. I might be mad that I can't do this, but at least I didn't waste an hour getting to the bottom and then find out, oh, crap, I'm in the wrong place. Right? If there's confusion, and this is a heuristic thing, a lot of times we found people filling out the wrong form, right? Is this the uncontested divorce or the contested divorce or the divorce with children or the divorce with, unmarried with children? Or, there's slightly different looking forms for each one and find they're in the wrong place. Slow is equal to fast. Let me back up. So every question is on a page all by itself. If you're all web savvy, and everybody in this room is, most of the time you'll see questions and then you scroll and then there's more things to fill out and then you scroll and there's more things to fill out. And we tested that with people and they were like, oh man, they would look at the right-hand side where the scroll bar is, see how tiny it is and how slowly it moves down, and they'd be depressed by the fact that they have a lot more to travel. It was like constantly reminding him that they're you're hours away from this. So one question per page, which sounds like it slows it down. And it turned out in our testing, it sped it up because they focused. I only have to answer this question. I'm done. I only have to answer this question. I'm done. And as a result of that focus and the sense that they were like making progress, because they're like, I've answered 27 questions. I've only got 35 more to go. There's a whole sort of dynamic to that. right? And finally, simple interfaces. That interface was not designed by a programmer. The programmers wanted the long scrollable list of empty boxes that you just scroll and fill out because it's efficient and stuff like that. But we don't want to design efficient for programmers. We want to design efficient for the audience, which is self-representing litigants, poor people, somewhat uneducated. English might be their second language, stressed out. That's a different audience, a different user than the programmer. So, and the last thing that we set ourselves to was we wanted this to be doable by lawyers who were not programmers. Because I don't think I can teach every law student I've ever met Python or JavaScript or something like that. I could teach some of them. I know there's like 1% or 5% of them that are that technical, but not the majority. And I want this thing to scale. I want lots of lawyers to do this. So that's what the authoring interface looks like. It's a bunch of boxes you fill in. There's a little bit of typing if-then statements. It's really, I could train somebody in an hour how to do this. And we have a lot of evidence. We've trained hundreds of law students and lawyers how to do this. And so we know that this works. So did this work? What do you think? Yeah, I've been talking about it for a half hour, and it's a failure. No. I hope it did. Yes, it's been used over 5 million times. It's produced over 3 million documents. And that's not a bad thing, by the way. Sometimes getting into it and then finding you're in the wrong place and getting out is a good thing. That's by design. So the number of times an interview has been run and the number of times a document got produced doesn't matter. Over 1,000 different forms have been automated across the United States. All kinds of things: domestic violence, temporary restraining orders, expungement orders, uncontested divorces, so on and so forth. But not just forms. Intake systems that ask you a bunch of questions about how much money you make. Calculators. What should you be getting from the government? Legal processes that might lead you to more information. A decision tree doesn't have to be about filling out a form. It could be about making a decision or getting more information or narrowing your search. Sound familiar, law librarians? Yes. We were automating law librarians, reference librarians a little bit there. So New York courts use this for their family law court, and they do surveys, and the surveys come back like insane. A very useful and time-saving tool. I'm very thankful. The DIY program saved me from getting anxiety or panic attacks. Thank you. It's like, that's exactly what we intended. We were so happy. There's 14,000 of these comments on their webpage. 95% positive, which is unheard of for a piece of software that's being used in a thing where people are unwillingly being forced to deal with the legal system. So we're unbelievably happy. So why should law librarians use these tools? Well, I'm hoping it's a little obvious, but I'm gonna make the case here. You already help people find legal information. This will find legal education, and it is AI. It's an expert system builder. It's a decision tree builder. You already do this with things like LibGuides. Somebody talked about LibGuides yesterday, and I just pulled a couple of examples here. Representing Yourself, a legal resource guide for pro se. Pro se is Latin for by yourself, of yourself, for yourself. I always get the preposition wrong. AIC Pro Se Litigants Resources. I only grabbed 2, but there's dozens and dozens of these on law school and legal aid websites all across the United States. You can build these things too. Trust me, if lawyers can do it, law librarians can do it, right? Right. Lawyers can code without a programmer. Law librarians can code without a programmer. You have the technology, you have the ability. There are enormous opportunities here. So we did a study a few years back where we went and saw, after doing this for 10 years, how much got done. And we said, well, there should be like about between 10 and 20 per state. This is all the low-hanging fruit, the easy forms to automate. and we counted which states had what, and that's the green. And so the pink is all the stuff that hasn't been done yet. And we're trying to get law students to do some of it, and we're working with law schools, and an A to J author is being taught in law schools as an experiential learning tool. It turns out that to automate a court form or to automate an area of law, you have to understand the law. That's what law students are learning. Now, they're not the best to do this because they're law students. They actually don't have that experience yet or that heuristic knowledge about how the practice space works. But it's good to introduce them to this because that's what their practice is going to start. All lawyering at the top of their license, not just the boring paperwork, administrative work. These are all the law schools we've worked with in the last few years. Sometimes it's just taught as a this exists. Sometimes the students the whole class does a project together. Sometimes every student has to do their own project. They can all do that at our website at a2jauthor.org. And if they actually finish and are confident that that it's to be made available to the public, we have a hosting site for that as well. I collect the syllabi for those courses at Syllabi Commons, which Cass and Brian pointed out there. I went and looked up to make sure your guys' syllabi were there. I was happy to see that. There's like about 49 there. It was just an intention to find out what everybody was trying to teach. So in conclusion, that law librarian could be the subject matter expert, and we can really make a dent in this problem. I don't know how big of a problem this is in China. I don't know if form filling out, but I do know that procedure following is a challenge everywhere. It's a universal human thing. Wherever there's a bureaucracy, there's going to be rules about the bureaucracy, and automating guidance for that can't be anything but helpful. So I hope that this becomes something that we can get law librarians to be doing a lot more of. I wanted to point out that I pulled a statistic. China both has the most internet users of any country in the world and the most non-internet users of any country in the world. At 2018, you're at the point where you're bigger than everybody else, and you also have the most opportunity for the rest. And I know that the majority of those people are probably getting the internet on their cell phones, on their smartphones, if they're getting it on their cell phones, on their smartphones, if they're getting it anywhere else. And so a mobile-first strategy is probably the way to go. This is my screen about mobile, and you see that people accessing the internet on mobile is outstripping desktop. So Chinese law schools and law libraries can be CAFLL members. It's cheap, it's $250, and you can get access to everything. But if you just want to use A to J Author, you don't even have to pay that. That's open for free to anybody in the world who are helping poor people. So it's a non-commercial operation because that's where our grants came from, and that's why we're doing that. So let me end it with this. If we are advocating for tech competency of lawyers and law students, well, then we better have that tech competency ourselves. I think that just makes sense. So that's my pitch. I'm done. And the one Chinese word I know, 谢谢.